Maya, 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 Maya,
Alo? Salut! Sunt eu, un haiduc și te rog, iubirea mea, primește fericirea. Alo? Alo? Sunt eu, Picasso, ți-am dat bip și sunt voinic, dar să știi, nu-ți cer nimic. Vrei să pleci, dar numai ei, numai ei, numai ei, chipul tău.
Greetings, Local Traveller Matt here, reporting back on the 5th day of our Romania trip. Actually the 6th day now, and I'm on the train going towards Baia Mare, but that's for tomorrow. So what did I do yesterday? It was a bit of a chill out day after all the travelling from the day before. Woke up a little bit later, and it was the first day where Tom and I actually split. So what we did, we got the car, drove into Brasov, and then I left Tom at the railway station and went off to see my fortified churches. Now Brasov, which I think is the third or fourth city in Romania, is an incredibly beautiful place. It really has aura of the fairy tale about it, probably because it was founded by German settlers in the Middle Ages, and there are, of course, most of our fairy tales are Germanic because of who collected them, and one of the most famous fairy tales is the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And in that fairy tale, a strange man comes to town with his pipe and lures away all the children, and it is thought that it's an allegorical tale, because at that time in medieval Germany, in towns like Hamelin, people would come to the town and convince all the young people to go and settle in the new lands in the east, which is of course places like Brasov, Transylvania, Romania, where we are now are. And so there was these medieval Germanic communities invited there by the local counts to kind of civilise the place, and that's very relevant because of the day that I spent today. So what I was looking at was fortified Saxon churches. I first heard about these many years ago when, probably 2012 I think it was, when I read a book by William Blacker called Along the Enchanted Way, which is one of the most incredible travelogues I have ever written. About his 10 years living in Transylvania, partly in Marmorish, partly in and around the area that I was visiting. And one of the things it talks about are these Saxon churches. So the Saxon community, again, there since the Middle Ages, very hard working, originally Catholic, later Lutheran, and they built right from the beginning these churches and then fortified them with walls, so they're almost like mini castles, because of the unfriendly neighbours, basically. And they became these glorious things. I mean, like, because in times of trouble everyone would go into the church and be safe within the walls, so there was little, you know, huts or buildings inside. It was a whole community. And William Blacker, in his book, he'd visited some and thought some work should be done to preserve them. And in fact, Prince Charles, now King Charles, he took up the cause and was very vocal in preserving these. 7 of them are listed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And I plan to go to some of these. I couldn't get to all 7 because they're too far apart, but I plan to go to about 4 or 5 of these. But the first one I went to was actually not on the UNESCO list, and it was only because I'd seen it on the map as being a fortified church very near the Pridniestrovia one, which was the one I'd initially decided to go to. It began with H. I've got Halma in my mind, but I don't think Halma was the name. I'll put it in the bio. And it was wonderful. It was amazing. And the guy on the reception was really friendly and really chatty. He was actually Romanian, but he believed passionately in preserving these. And it was one of the most incredible places I've ever been. It was wonderful. You could actually walk around all the walls. There was museums in some of the buildings, and of course the church itself. Although being Lutheran, the churches are not that exciting, because the Protestants tend to be a bit minimalistic. But it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And while I was there, I asked him, like, why is this not on a World Heritage List? And he said, literally, UNESCO just picked one from each region. He said, and a lot of it goes on the buildings nearby, and although this church was of a suitable standard, a lot of the buildings nearby weren't, so they picked another church in the area, which is a shame, because this was certainly worthy. While I was there, I met a Venezuelan lady, and she was travelling around. She was saying it was quite hard to get to them on the bus, so I offered to take her to the next church in the car, and we got chatting. She travelled to about 90 countries, used to be a photojournalist, done a lot in war zones, and we had a really good little chat. I mean, at one point she was thinking about accompanying me to some of the other churches, but in the end decided to go back to Brasov. But it was a nice little bit of company. Also, when I was in that first church, I bought this incredible box, hand-painted box, that was glorious, and it wasn't that expensive, and I'll either give it to my goddaughter or keep it for myself, I'm not sure, but it's really lovely. It's not often I buy nice gifts, but that one was one of them. Anyway, we went to there, then we went to the one at Pridniestrovia. Now, Pridniestrovia is the biggest of the fortified churches. It's got an inner bailey and an outer bailey, and I mean the inner bailey, it's remarkable. There's all these, they almost look like cells all the way up. I mean, you could fit a whole town in there. I personally felt it was less atmospheric than the first one, though. That's that. And so I bade goodbye to my Venezuelan friend, and then drove kind of northwest towards Sighisoara. Sighisoara is a fairy tale city. I went to it during my 2003 trip when I explored Brasov. Wonderful city. Again, not going again because I've been, but an absolutely glorious place. But I remember travelling on the train to Sighisoara and passing all these almost medieval looking villages with these fantastic churches, and that was what I was going to see. But what I realised as I was going along is that there's hundreds of these fortified churches, about 175 all told. And the UNESCO ones really are not much more remarkable than the others. I passed a couple, and then I decided to stop at one very dramatic looking one at Gara Lupia, I think it was called. Unfortunately, it was shut, and you can see why it wasn't a UNESCO one, because although it was huge, parts of the walls have been built on and were now like a school or a police station, and there were some nice Saxon buildings around, but half of them were gone and replaced by more modern buildings. So it was a wonderful place, but it wasn't quite at the same standard. But the one I was aiming for was Viskri, and but I missed the turning for Viskri, and then I got sidetracked to an Orthodox monastery, and it was dedicated to St. George, and of course St. George is the patron saint of England, and it was a significant day for England. We were in the final of the Women's Euros, but also I'd been to the Shrine Church of St. George in Lod in Israel only a few months before, so I thought, right, I'm going to go to that. And it was a gorgeous setting. It was Camino-esque as you approach it. Really, it'd be great to do a Camino in Transylvania. It'd be perfect for it. Villages every 5k or so, fantastic churches. Yeah, wow, what a Camino it would be. But it was actually a very new monastery. But even though it was new, it had an intense sense of silence about it. And the church was glorious. I sat in there and enjoyed the frescoes, and it really was wonderful. And when I came out, I said some prayers with candles outside, and I rang the bell thinking that's what you would do to say the prayers, and it actually summoned a sister, and her name is Sister Katerina. She was very young, actually. I would say probably in her late 20s or something, but she was a lovely girl, and she told us like they made their money by growing lavender, and which they made into tea and other herbs. And so I bought some lavender off them, and because I use it to help me sleep actually, and we had a nice little chat, and she mentioned the stillness and the silence of the place. Apparently her monastery was founded in 1994, and there are 3 sisters there, and she said she would pray for me and my mum, who's not very well at the moment, but I also said I would pray for her, because I think prayer works both ways, and she was lovely, she really was. So then I was going towards Viscry and came across another fortified church. I thought I'll stop and have a look at that one. I'll write the name in underneath, and that was wonderful as well. I mean, it was surrounded by a wall, and there was an old guy, and I think he was actually a Saxon, just sat there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you want to go in the church?" And he opened it up for me. Now there were no houses or anything in the circular wall around. It was more like sheds, but the church had very beautiful painted galleries inside, and again, no tourists, not overly restored or anything, and it just had that special feeling about it. And apparently the tower was where the priests and people used to hide in times of trouble, and on it it's carved works like, you know, God is my refuge and my strength, and these have been carved whilst they're under attack. Wow. So continued on to Viscry, about 6 kilometres through a gypsy village on the edge of town. Viscry is famous because that's where Prince Charles used to go a lot when he was prince, not king. A bit busy these days. And it's got one of the most spectacular of fortified churches on a hill, and it is like a castle. Problem is you couldn't park in the village, you had to walk up, so it was a fair bloody walk actually. It was a very hot day, but the village is just gorgeous. It's these perfectly preserved Saxon houses, although I noticed very few Saxons living in them. And of course most of the Saxons, they emigrated to Germany. During Ceausescu time, he was selling visas for them, and then of course after, you know, they emigrated for a better life. Very few left. A lot of gypsies moved into the villages, and certainly I saw a lot on the outer edges of the village. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous village, absolutely wonderful. And the church, again, spectacular. I climbed up the tower and looked out all around, and it was just wonderful. But by then it was time to go home, so I drove back, picked up Tom from a railway station in the middle of nowhere, got to our accommodation, and wanted to try and watch the second half of the women's final. Struggled, but there was these Slovak lads there, and they were really friendly, and they found us an illegal streaming service, and so we watched the second half, and it went to extra time, and it went to penalties, and England won. They beat Spain on penalties, which is, I mean, Spain are amazing, they're the best team in the competition, and they'd beaten us in the World Cup final before, so it was a little bit of a payback. So we actually got to see England win the European Championships, all the way in Romania. Last time they won the European Championships, we were in Serbia, so there we are. And when they lost in the final, we were at our friend Pierre Dupont's house in the French Alps, so it always seems to happen in a faraway place like that. Anyway, that was that. Went to bed early because of today. So that's for tomorrow.
Te sun să-ți spun ce simt acum. Alo, iubirea mea, sunt eu, fericirea.